Adam became a living being, so when he was made, when he was created, he was alive. God put a spirit of life into him, into this body he formed, and when the two came together, you have a living being. And when God takes away the tree of life, he does it so that, albeit temporarily, Adam doesn't continue living. So he takes away the tree of life. Now Adam starts to die, and then he dies. And when he dies, that spirit of life leaves his body, and he's no longer a living being. He's no longer that thing which began to exist. After all, the spirit before it went into Adam wasn't a living spirit called Adam. It required the body. Simple, right? You're alive when you begin to exist. You're a living creature. And when the spirit of life leaves you, you're not alive anymore. Dead. In other words, you're dead. In other words, death is what happens when being alive is no longer true. It's the cessation of being alive. Now, very simple, right? If a man dies, will he live again? And Jesus answers that yes. And the reason it's called a sleep is because Jesus wakes everybody up, good and bad. Some to everlasting life, that is, unto living forever, having brought them back to life. It's a resurrection from the dead back to life. It's also called the resurrection unto life, because he raises you from the dead back to being alive again. So it's like a sleep. The lost people will also be resurrected to face the judgment. That's why they're not in hell before the judgment, because he separates them when he comes. And they suffer the lake of fire, which is the second death. Why is it the second death? Because having died before in history and being made alive again, having been raised from the dead, woken back up to life, when they get thrown into the lake of fire, fire does what it does, which is kill you, and that's permanent. It's eternal. You die a second time, and you stay dead after you've been judged. That's why it's a second death, okay? You die again. You stop being alive again, having been resurrected. Very simple. Dead people aren't alive because that's what it means to die. It means having been alive, you're no longer alive. That's death. It's the cessation of life. Very simple. Now here's how people complicate it. Some people believe, well, your body dies, but you're still alive. So you have death and life being polar opposites, but dead people are also alive. Okay? So some of those people say, well, the Bible does call people who have died, who are really alive, they say, spiritually. Just their body died. I guess they have immortal souls, which is anti-biblical. But it's just talking about their body, even though the Bible doesn't say it's just talking about their body. It says they die, they're alive, or they are dead. Okay? Now, some people say the Bible sometimes calls the people who have died but are alive spiritually or something, or in their soul's still alive. Sometimes the Bible calls them dead, but they're both dead because their body's dead and their soul is alive. Sometimes some people say, well, that's how it is, and yet they acknowledge that sometimes people who have died, who are really alive, are referred to as the dead. Apparently they mean people who have died and aren't resurrected into a body yet, but they are alive. Other people say, no, the Bible does not call those people dead. So they don't acknowledge that the Bible refers to those who have died, who aren't really dead because their spirit's alive. They say the Bible is teaching, no, they're people who are not dead because, he's the God of the living, not the God of the dead. So they deny that the Bible calls those people dead, although some people who do acknowledge that the Bible calls them dead are saying, but the Bible's teaching they're not really dead, they're alive. Other people deny that the Bible even calls those people dead, because in fact the Bible is calling those people who have died alive and not dead. Then there's people out of those groups that say, well, they may or may not refer to them as the dead, but they certainly aren't dead, which is a contradiction, by the way. But the Bible calls them dead, but they're not dead. Other people calls them in fact, doesn't affirm that they are called the dead, but it's saying they are alive, even though they have died, and their body's still dead. Some people out of these groups, they say, well, they've been resurrected into their spiritual bodies upon death. These people aren't quite sure what to make of a physical resurrection, or if that's even a thing. And so they think you go to heaven when you die, and that is a physical resurrection. Even though they don't believe your spirit or soul ever dies, and you're not being resurrected into a body, but they think this is the resurrection, that you get a spiritual resurrection body upon death, even though your spirit didn't ever die, just your body died. So how that's a resurrection is hard to understand. Out of those people, there's also another group of people that say, well, yes, that is a resurrection also, but there's also some passages that talk about a resurrection, which is talking about a bodily resurrection at some time in the future. And they're not quite sure what the bodily resurrection is. Is it a different kind of body? Okay. So out of all these groups who make it so confusing, here's the reality. It's all garbage and trash. Bible doesn't teach any of it. It's confusion from Greek philosophy. The Bible teaches that dead people are people who stopped being alive, that there's a physical bodily resurrection into a better body that's physical, has physicality. And that's the hope of the faith, and that the righteous get that body, which lives forever, when Jesus returns and raises the dead. It can be very complicated to talk about when people have all sorts of false ideas that they insert into the text. Because after all, their hope isn't in the biblical hope of the return of Jesus, but they're confused about life and death being the enemy of God, and life being what God's about. But they're not quite sure, because they've been preaching people into heaven upon death as though they were set free from their body to go to heaven. One wonders why there's a bodily resurrection at all.